Welcome to Disrupted Science, the occasional conversation. It looks like it might be weekly between me, Kent Anderson, and Joy Moore. We're the authors of the upcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science. I'm Kent,
And I'm Joy.
and it's June 4th, 2025. So let's get right into it. First of all, thanks for all the feedback on the first episode. It really helped us. You'll notice there are upgrades in our presentation. We're going to try to be a little bit shorter this time, and we'll keep taking your feedback. We really appreciate it. It helped us a lot. So please keep it coming. If you like this episode, if you see things we can do better, we're always willing to improve. And then we're going to talk about some stuff, right?
Yeah, what are we talking about today, Kent?
Oh, we're talking about COVID and DOIs and preprints and I think a couple of other fun things, but
A couple of
anyhow,
other of a few unexpected surprises, but they're all within the themes of what we've been researching and how some of the stuff that is out there in the world really fits together within the scholarly publishing ecosystem.
yeah,
So
and good tech and bad tech. So,
good tech and bad tech. Yeah.
so I'm going to start kick things off with a little bit of an overview from a post earlier this week where a few threads came together. There was a confluence of things with a preprint that was posted in April, with one of the authors being the Surgeon General of the state of Florida, talking about the overall mortality risk of COVID vaccines. And it was posted on medRxiv, and it sat there unnoticed until Joe Rogan picked it up toward the end of May. And then it, of course, took off because that's how these things go. And it made me realize the vulnerability that we have with these preprint servers now with MAHA in charge because they depend so much on on scientific and cultural norms. And if there's a group of people who like to break those, it's these folks. And so I could see this being the tip of the iceberg when it comes to them seeding studies that try to prove a narrative they've already described to us in excruciating detail.
So
And
Kent,
yeah,
what was this study focused on?
yeah,
What was the sound bite that got Joe Rogan's attention?
yeah. So the soundbite was that the COVID-19 had caused more death than World War I, World War II, and Vietnam combined. Um, And that was based on the idea that there was an all-cause mortality increase with the vaccinations. The people who did the study pulled out what they called two matched cohorts, and they were, you look and the numbers are very precisely matched.
Hmm.
And they showed that overall mortality rates for the Pfizer vaccine were higher than for the Moderna vaccine. And they did some funky math and said, well, that means that these vaccines are causing all this excess mortality. Um, but they didn't have a control group. And when you looked at the entire population, because it was a large population that they sampled out of, if you looked at the entire population, the lines actually flipped. So the
Hmm.
Moderna vaccine became slightly more, you know, all cause mortality in some cases and overall than the other. And so what they were basically for non-COVID, right? So what they were saying is that I don't know what they were saying quite, but what the overall data seemed to show is that Moderna's vaccine was slightly better at preventing COVID-related deaths
Hmm.
than Pfizer because they it non-COVID overall mortality was higher in the Moderna group, meaning that it prevented more COVID deaths. People had to die from other things.
Yeah.
But it was latched on to, and the Surgeon General of Florida is well known for planting things in the literature and being anti-COVID vaccine.
Hmm.
And it just fits a pattern of people doing these data dives and coming up with things that fit their narrative. And so it was a
Right.
little worrisome.
Yeah, and it's the kind of these are the kind of studies that either, wouldn't pass original submission to most journals, or it would be published in a journal that didn't do very rigorous peer review at all.
Right.
But they like to go ahead and post the preprints because that it's like they're revealing secrets that nobody else wants to tell you. And
Right.
especially if you're a big brand name like the Surgeon General of Florida, who knows how to publish, and I would presume that's really effective. And so that's why they really like these preprints. What's going on in their um, in their minds, do you think,
Well,
of going straight to
yeah.
this source data?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One, going to there's a trend, and it goes with myocarditis and some other conditions that they attribute to vaccines, to look at death certificates, to
Hmm.
go and troll death certificates to try to find correlations
Hmm.
that they can change the controls until they find what they want. So they're cherry picking and narrative spinning.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that's a convenient way to do it. It worries me because you have the government now compiling all this data, and these people will have access to it. And we've already seen the disastrous results of their invented citations and bad research practices to drive a narrative that already existed 10 years ago, courtesy of other initiatives. But
Hmm.
the other thing is that, like you said, preprints are used by Joe Rogan and others to, because they do sound cutting edge, they do sound leading edge. It does sound like, psst, hey, I got a preprint over here. And studies have found that that's exactly true. White nationalists like to use them because they seem more scientifically connected if they are able to use the word preprint in what they say. They got early word,
Mm.
they're on the inside. Same for alt-right media sources. And so, just calling something a preprint, it's not what we think of as a temporary paper shopped around to a few friends to, get some feedback before you submit it to a journal. Now it's become a marker of almost inside trading on upcoming science, right? It's like, I've got a secret.
Yeah. And they're really starting to learn a lot of the lingo. I guess they're kind of science curious, right? If you're positing bold statements, and you can find some literature that backs it up, that makes it all the more compelling. And it gets people like us spinning, trying to explain why they're wrong. By the time we get to have this conversation, they've already moved on to the next one. So it's really a kind of a whack-a-mole situation here.
Yeah, yeah. So, I wanted to bring it up because, again, there's a kind of a history developing here of, over the last year. Harlan Krumholtz, the director of medRxiv, has been involved in a couple of preprints that had people who were adjacent to RFK who were spinning up vaccine injury claims, who seemed to be coalescing a class action group. And there were disclosure issues around those. Krumholtz became a little skittish when pressed on some basic questions about it. And, it's just a concern because medRxiv is referred to in the lay press as a journal sometimes.
Mm,
People don't understand. It's a powerful brand, and it has powerful brands behind it. It has BMJ behind it, has Yale behind it, has Cold Spring Harbor Labs behind it, has Chan
yeah.
Zuckerberg Initiative behind it. It looks authentic. It looks like what's there should be trustworthy, but it's not. And and it's being used to seed this kind of misleading information that the MAHA folks and Joe Rogan and others can use to suppress vaccination efforts and drive supplement sales and feed wellness industry things, all sorts of, so
Hmm.
it's just, it was kind of an early warning in my mind.
Yeah.
This is now three in a row.
Yeah.
You better watch
Well,
out.
and
There's a pattern here.
it's the hazardous state we're in, with everything being so open and unregulated.
Right.
And there's no lifeguard on duty. It's swim at your own risk. And there's probably a lot of scientists who are using these servers for the right purposes, but it's all mixed up and undiscernible, what a lot of the intentions are, behind a lot of these papers that are showing up.
Yeah,
So
so you raise an interesting vocabulary point. that I hadn't thought of before, which is if you had called open access deregulated science,
Hmm.
might not have gone as far, right?
Right.
We're going to have deregulated science.
Well,
So,
that's boring.
yeah, A, boring, and B, that sounds wrong. But anyhow, so that was, something that needed to be talked about, I think, and we'll see where it goes. The other
Hmm.
thing is that the CZI sponsorship of Open Archive, which in my mind was that, remember CZI is an LLC, so it's a for-profit entity that they've spun up initiatives and sold them off and things like that. And the stock transfer was basically from one pocket to another with you know, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan going into their investment firm, but they basically acquired through a nonprofit affiliated with this for-profit entity the preprint servers, medRxiv and bioRxiv, and they can take all that content into their AI systems and LLMs. And as we move forward, if more misinformation or bad information is going into these LLMs, and we already have PubMed Central indexing preprints and some of the OA content that we found problematic recently. What does that forebode for these systems and their reliability? So,
Yeah, that's a good point. And then the fact that they're all linked through DOIs and through citations, both looking backwards through the reference list. So there's you know, papers that have been peer reviewed properly that are cited in some of
mhm.
these preprints, and then there are also people who are citing the preprints and taking them forward in the scholarly record that way.
Yep.
And so as soon as they get out there, they are part of the network, and unpacking that from either, through machine learning to discern what to keep and what to exclude that's a little mind-boggling there.
Yeah, it's a little tough. It's a
Yeah.
little tough. So, yeah.
Well,
But so
so
that was one thing, but go ahead, sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say, so I was looking into something on the same theme. And they're really doubling down on the vaccine safety, and particularly related to myocarditis. And
Mm,
we saw what happened on the 27th, when RFK announced that they were taking the recommendation for children and pregnant women for the COVID vaccine off the schedule
right.
at the CDC. And that kind of came out of the blue to a lot of people, including folks at the CDC and some of the reporting that was out there. But as with just about everything, nothing is an accident, and it didn't come out of the blue.
Right.
Um, and so this is from another group who actually did publish something in a journal. And I came across it because somebody sent me a link to a news clip on YouTube from News Nation, which is always on the treadmill when I get to the gym.
Mm, yep. Yep.
It's a Sinclair Media syndication of more right-wing content into local markets in
Right.
particular.
Right.
That's really their bread and butter.
Yep.
And it was an interview with a doctor from Texas who was describing a new landmark study that he and his co-authors had just published, that brought to light heretofore unknown information about the dangers of the mRNA vaccines. And
Mhm.
they went through all of the literature. They have 341 references. They make
Jeez.
a
Wow.
big deal about how many references. As I followed this paper around the internet, everything about it said we have a lot of references. I'm like, great. Um,
It's all
and
quantity.
and so the narrative in this paper, this systematic review, is that they found more evidence of harm based on looking at papers in the Lancet and 340 others, that added up to a story that had not been told by public health officials or the professional associations, and they're very specific in their narrative around that.
Hmm.
This is a scoop. And so I looked up the Dr. Milhon who was on the news program, and it took me a little while to figure out how to get to the paper. And I managed to find it only going through Google Scholar, and it took me through to ResearchGate,
Mm.
and straight to the PDF. And so I had to backtrack to the account of the ResearchGate member who had posted it. And he works for the McCullough Foundation.
Ah,
Um, and he has 26 other papers on his profile. And scrolling down, they're all on different analyses of vaccine safety related to COVID. Um, and so I said, okay, where's the journal? Because the journal was one that I was not familiar with. It's the still doesn't quite roll off the tongue. The International Journal of Cardiovascular Research and Innovation.
mm.
So it's a cardiology journal, and it is published by Reseapro Journals. And I was not familiar with that journal publisher either. So I started to look around. It's published open access. It was published on the 20th of March. Um, Myocarditis after SARS-CoV-2 infection and COVID-19 vaccination, epidemiology outcomes, and new perspectives. Um, and in addition to the 341 references, there's also some quite scary looking cartoon figures, which I
Yeah,
invite people to check out for themselves.
I'll try to put them
Um,
up on the screen.
yeah. And so I said, okay, what's up with this journal? It's an open access journal. It was launched a few years ago. They've had a few issues. It's quarterly. They say that they do double blind peer review, which I thought was interesting because that's not something that most journals do regularly.
Right.
And in the information inviting submissions, they make a big point to say that the journal's open access, rapid publication, rigorous peer review, and a DOI is available.
Mm.
So that's really the kind of the key selling point there is that you can get a DOI along with your open access and your fast peer review.
Right.
And so Reseapro Scientific is a vendor based out of India. They have virtual offices in Durham, North Carolina, and in the UK. And they really provide author services is their bread and butter, where manuscript editing, pre-submission help. They'll help authors figure out where to publish, how to get into a journal that's indexed. And it's definitely, they've got a large team, I think it's 100, 700 staff members that
Wow.
can give
Yeah.
you basically whatever you need. And they've got their phone number
Mhm.
helpfully posted on every page of uh, every part of their website.
Right.
Um, and they list on their site that they've done work, or that their recent publications include Nature Scientific Reports, Biomed Central, PLOS, and then a lot of the literature on their site, they talk about how to get published by Elsevier and Springer Nature.
Okay.
So indicating that they are probably an author services partner vendor to some of the big publishers.
Right.
So they've got the tools that um, that they need and the experience to spin up a journal.
Right.
So about the journal itself, the journal, uh, the editor of the journal is also the lead author on the paper. Um, and the rest of the authors on the paper all work for the McCullough Foundation. So Peter McCullough runs the McCullough Foundation, which has been up and running for just a few years now, and
Hmm.
they are dedicated on doing research and advocacy around a lot of health harms. Um, and right there on their site, they announced that Dr. McCullough, the head of the foundation, has just been named editor-in-chief of their new journal. So basically, they created their own journal. And then instead of going through preprint servers or going through many of the thousands and thousands of existing open access publishing options, they decided to set up their own shop with Reseapro, um, which I thought was that was a clever way to do it. And back to what we were talking about last week with RFK Jr. saying, we don't need these journals, we can do our own. Well, clearly they
Yeah.
can, and they can do it with vendors who know exactly how to get it done.
Right. Prop one up fast. So a little bit of background since I like to dig around. So
Mm-hmm.
McCullough was a vice chief of internal medicine at Baylor and also a cardiologist. Um, so he seemed like, the kind of doctor you'd want to be. But in October 2022, the American Board of Internal Medicine recommended that his board certifications be revoked due to his promotion of misinformation. And in January of this year, the ABIM revoked both of his certifications. So, and that's a common thread we see. I think two or three of the authors on this paper have had their board certifications or practice privileges revoked um,
Right.
because of this. And
Well,
the
and
other
then
thing, the McCullough Foundation started one other little detail in
mhm.
2023 with $600,000, $659,000. Um, he had $1,000 in investment income and spent $22.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what 2024, because all of these guys also have a really active and successful Substack newsletters.
Yeah.
And sometimes those can throw off a lot of cash. And if they're tucking it into the foundation and starting to pay themselves, that would be something that wouldn't surprise me. So,
Right. So it looks like the McCullough Foundation is the R&D side of things, and they are partnered um, with the Independent Medical Alliance,
right,
which is another nonprofit that was formerly known as the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, the FLCCC, that was spun up in April of 2020. And so they have been working ever since then in terms of advocacy and outreach, with a particular focus on mothers and children around everything having to do with COVID and vaccines and harms. And the folks running that operation, Paul Marek and Pierre Corey, we've come across before. They were also sanctioned by ABIM, and reading some of the news pieces about that came out at the time, their reaction was, that's fine, we don't need you guys anyway.
right,
Either they're not practicing medicine anymore, or what they're doing doesn't require ABIM certification.
right.
And so they are the ones who are in DC and probably closest to what's going on within the new HHS administration, I
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah, yeah, yep. And they all have Substacks, and that's something to even the Independent Medical Association has one, or Alliance. What is Alliance?
Yeah.
Independent Medical Alliance has one. So they have, this part of doing R&D. Now they have a journal apparently that they've put in the middle, and then they have the Substack spray
Mm-hmm.
application into social media, and then they get picked up on into the ecosystem by the Joe Rogans and others of the world to amplify their message sooner. So it's a really neatly integrated, vertically integrated little communication environment. It's kind of reminds me of what the Sacklers did back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
right? They had, what was their publication they had, that would push pharma, things out to people, and then they had the Purdue Pharma, and they had all this stuff. So, I don't know that these guys are yet running in supplement company or anything like that, but I'm sure that some of them are
Yeah, I was
dabbling.
wondering about what's the end game, right? So, um,
Well, I think they're making a lot off of subscriptions at Substack. I've seen estimates that it's, multi-million dollars of revenue coming through those conspiracy newsletters.
mhm.
And so that's good, for them. I think, if they are able to shelter their profits in the foundation, that might be something that's attractive to them too. But yeah, I don't know. They definitely aren't doing science to discover the truth, though. I mean, they're doing they're doing propaganda in a sense.
Right. It's the medcoms model, right?
Right, right,
They're making papers that support a point of view. And they can continue to do that like we're seeing with people all over the place, using the systematic review form factor to justify basically whatever you want, and then overwhelming people with detail. And you talk about, reproducibility, um, and that term is now being weaponized against,
actual science.
the actual scientists.
Yeah, because
And
I'm
yeah,
sure that the preprint that found, that I'm sure they can reproduce that cohort finding multiple times because
right.
it's wrong, but it's
Yeah.
reproducible. So that wrong does reproducible doesn't mean right when you come to data. And so that's kind of it's a red herring term, and it's, one that we kind of, I think my sense was we moved a little bit beyond, you know, 10 years ago, and now they're picking it up again and resuscitating it because they've realized it has rhetorical power and
Hmm.
it does sound impressive. And, they will use, etiology instead of cause,
Right.
they fancy up their language. They try to appropriate scientific language. We were talking earlier about, AI. You've got what, P doom and P hope, whether you're, so you can't just say, are you optimistic or pessimistic about AI? You've got to dress it up in some sort of quasi mathematical formulation. What's your P
Oh, that's
doom?
what
What's your
those
P
mean?
hope?
Uh,
Yeah, it's really it's really obnoxious, and I hope it goes away soon. But yeah, so the one thing that it kind of in my mind joined these together. So when I wrote my post, I said, you know, it's always struck me as odd that preprints get a DOI
hmm.
because there's no reason they should be part of the permanent scientific record. They don't pass peer review. And
Well, but you raise a good point. And if, you know, going back to, you know, the origin of the DOI in scholarly publishing, it's a tool, right? It's a tool
right,
to connect point A to point B, to have a permanent way to find a single piece of content.
right,
That just so happened to be part of the certification process of publishing. So along with your citation, your journal, volume, issue, and page, you now had this other bit of information,
right,
that was both a technical uh, bit of data to make things work, but has also proven to be an extension of the certification
Right,
process.
because it's has a unique purpose, a unique look, right?
Yeah,
It has a unique structure. Then,
right.
and if you know, and I know Ed knows I think this, but I've seen back when I was really looking at predatory publishers, a lot of them doing like this, we have DOIs, we have a
Hmm.
DOI, as if that's they've crossed some sort of magical threshold.
Hmm.
And, that's, you're right, it's idiosyncratic enough to be almost a branding element.
Hmm.
So,
Well, yeah. And so, Reseapro as a publisher now, they launched their publishing program a few years ago, would qualify, I imagine, as a Crossref member and probably at the lower end of the sliding scale, I would
right.
imagine.
Well, and that got
Um,
us talking about what that sliding scale is. So we looked at
mhm.
it and
Mhm.
I, I was surprised. So,
And
um,
again, it's the outside. If you step back and think and take it all together, that there was a top-down decision from the head of Health and Human Services to put a vaccine, take a vaccine recommendation off the list based on some people getting a DUI. I mean,
right,
that's and completely circumventing the whole process. Of course, this is speculation. I don't know that this paper was the reason that they made that decision. But the media campaign and the fact that the foundation, kind of like terrorists taking responsibility for a bombing,
right,
immediately put out there that, their work has paid off.
right.
It's pretty crummy, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and for uh, Reseapro to get a DOI, let's assume their revenues are less than $1 million a year, it would cost them $275 to become a DOI member
Yeah.
or a Crossref member and be able to peddle DOIs out to journals that people that wanted to start journals with them.
Hmm.
And,
Well,
that's pretty
they've got a
cheap.
list, and their journals program is growing. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so, with all the barriers to entry are so low and everything's so open that it's become a sort of a feeding frenzy, and that's a little depressing, especially um, when the people in authority now are not who you would want in place if you wanted to have a you know good science and evidence-based information. So, and it's
well,
all going into
apparently,
AI systems. So
Ken, apparently now evidence is in the eye of the person who writes the press release, you know.
exactly. You mean the preprint? I mean, oh yeah, same thing. But Um, yeah, so those are a couple of things we wanted to talk about, kind of how this continues to grow. There's some early warning signs here. I think
Mhm.
that the people who are really pushing this MAHA agenda and coming after vaccination, coming after legitimate scientists, in addition to defunding things and gutting agencies and all of that, they've learned the journals game
Mhm.
and they've learned the publication game, and they may, unless things change and people in positions of power and leverage and authority are able to start to put up some barriers, they may swamp the system even more than it's been swamped so far, and that would be a shame.
341 references is a lot. Can you
That
imagine how much they're going to come up with next time?
more references is better
More
science.
references, more science.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's a quick run through of a couple of things we wanted to talk about. So we're going to try a little closing segment we're going to call Discoveries of the Week.
Yeah, what'd you
So
find, Ken?
I found this, the AI Con at the library, and it's a great book. It's by two researchers that you first, I think, heard on Tech Won't Save Us, and I think I heard them
Yeah.
too and was really impressed. They were really good. Emily Bender and Alex Hanna. Emily's from the University of Washington, and Alex is at the University of California, Berkeley. And the tone, the writing is crisp, it moves, the tone is great, it's sassy, it's subversive, it's funny, it's no holds barred. They're right, I think, about a lot of things, and they know what they're talking about. So it's a great book, it's a great read. They have a really good section, you might see it here with all the little flags in it about science and AI. And they have some
Mm-hmm.
really great takes on that. And it was reassuring because we're just wrapping up the the draft of our book that we've kind of landed in the same space as they when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to AI and some of the other things. We talk about it a little bit more and from different angles, but it was reassuring. It's like, okay, those are two really smart, well-informed people, and you know it was just reassuring. So that's my find of the week. The AI Con. Get it from your library.
I
Sorry
do.
for the
I need to put it on hold and go get it from my library. I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoyed the conversation that they had on the Tech Won't Save Us podcast. I highly recommend it. Those guys are great and they find some really qualified people and it's very down to earth.
yeah.
It's kind and so and they're not outrageously like the sky is falling, everyone's getting ripped off. They are academics and practitioners who are saying, well, we do this every day and these things aren't necessarily
Yeah.
what
I think the
is
biggest
anyone
message
thinking.
that they say, and this gets stacked back to this kind of P doom and P hope and all that, is they say, this everybody's portraying AI as if it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
They say it's not inevitable.
Yeah.
It's something we invented. Um, you can turn it off. You can change it. You can modify how you approach things. It's not inevitable. And I think that's an important message about everything we talk about here is that, none of this has to be this way. Um, we can change things. We're in control. We can fix things. We can make decisions. So that was really, that's always a good thing to be reminded of. So it's a great book. I recommend it. So
Awesome.
you have a discovery too,
I
right?
have a discovery of the week, which is a new pickleball club um,
Wow.
that opened up here I'm in Williamsburg, Virginia. And if you've ever been here in the summer, I'm sure you'll never come back because it's awful. It's very hot and it's very buggy. And so I was looking for something else to do that didn't involve being outside in the swamp. And this is really cool. It's in a building that used to be a standalone Dick's Sporting Goods,
Hmm.
in a kind of broken down strip mall area, industrial park.
Right.
And this building was probably just going to sit there forever because I don't know if any big box stores are coming back around.
Right.
Um, and it's so the entire place is just pickleball courts, and with a nice staff who says, download the app, sign up for stuff, and make some friends and come play. And that's what I did. So it's cool because it's a good combination of using, self-serve technology with the app. I mean, there are people there to help you. I took a clinic. I improved my dinking. So got that.
Always
My
gotta
net
check that
game is
box sometime in
improving.
life.
Um, and it also is good for the noise pollution because all the pickleballers are in this big building out in the
Right.
middle of nowhere, um, fully soundproofed and air conditioned. They're open from 6 a.m. to midnight.
Wow.
And so it's going to be a lot of fun. I already signed up for the league, so wish
There
me
you
luck.
go. There you go. It's going to be awesome. That's great.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we have that same kind of thing up here. That I think part of Natick Mall's been repurposed into a, kind of an upscale pickleball area. My wife went to look at it and it was a little too upscale, a little too, sweaters around the shoulders and hairdo just right kind of place. But yeah, pickleball's exploding, and it's great that they're finding this way to repurpose real estate. It's kind of what we need to do as everybody's gone work from home and as
Mhm.
Amazon takes over in retail. So, or
Yeah.
online shopping, I guess. Now Walmart's pretty good too. All right, so that's
Although I
it.
have to
Oh, go
say,
ahead.
speaking of Amazon, I tried to buy a set of pickleballs there, but their scanner didn't work, so they told me to order some on Amazon.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Wow. Well, I guess they're obviously very practical people. I like it. All right,
Mhm.
so that's this week. We'll try this again. Let us know what you think, and we'll continue to improve things, and we'll keep talking about things as they develop. We hope you get some value out of this, and we'll have some news about the book, I think, next week. So
Yep, it's
we'll try
coming along
that.
great. All
There you
right.
go. All right, thanks everybody.
Take
Thanks, Joy.
care. Bye.